Welcome into Cyhawk Talk here in the midweek edition of the show. We call it the Wednesday show. Sometimes we record it on Tuesdays. This time it does happen to be a Wednesday. So it's signing day. It's the start of signing day. It's a 3-day signing period, I should say. So both our teams are, grabbing some high school players in a unique point in the college football landscape, given that they're condensing rosters to 105. So it's kind of been an interesting year to recover recruiting. It's not at all the same as what it used to be, but maybe we'll talk a little bit about that later. Ben, how are things going in the Cyclone portion of the world?
They're going well, Ethan. I mean, what a week to be talking Cy and Hawks. A lot of football news, of course, with the Big 12 championship game coming up. It's an optimistic time here in Ames, and lots of other kinds of news coming out of Iowa City. So it's quite the time to be following one of these two teams.
Yeah, I don't know when the last time the Cyclones were in the Big 12 championship game. It might have been the 2020 year now that I think about it. But what's the talk in the town going into the Big 12 title game against Arizona State?
Yeah, people like to cast it back to that 2020 game. Of course, it looked a lot different with COVID being a thing. It was a limited crowd in AT&T Stadium that day. I did see something like tickets, the regular kind of general tickets where most fans would sit are, I believe, sold out for this game. So I'm anticipating a lot of Cyclone fans to be going down and making the trip to Arlington in the next couple days. And people like to think back to that 2020 game where Iowa State was 34 yards short of beating Oklahoma that day with a touchdown, ended up losing by 6 points after Brock Purdy threw a pass to Xavier Hutchinson, and it got intercepted. Brees Hall was in that game. Lots of these names that are now talked about like legends were the people who got Iowa State to the championship game in 2020. So I wonder how we'll reflect back on this championship game with names like Rocco Becht and Jaden Higgins and Jalen Knoll as the guys who got them there this year.
Yeah, I've been to one Big 12 championship game in my life. It was in 2012, and neither of
Whoa.
the two teams that played in that game are still in the Big 12. So it's certainly interesting to be saying Big 12 title game and Arizona State in the same sentence. I suppose that's what makes the latest version of college football fun, though, right? We're getting uh, new opponents facing each other all the time as conference foes, and it's just a fun, unique time. It's also giving you a chance to see one of the premier running backs in the country. Last time he played an Iowa team, he averaged 10 yards a carry, and that was when he was at Sacramento State. That's Cam Skattebo. What's the talk in about Iowa State maybe stopping this guy? I know that there's maybe some concern that they haven't had the best year stopping elite running backs.
Cam Skattebo is a beast. Matt Kimball told us Monday that he's just a different human being, like physically. He's the toughest and I don't know if biggest, but certainly the most physical running back Iowa State's going to face this season. And he's dominating teams this year. He might be the hardest player to tackle outside of Ashton Jeanty in all of college football. He's so fun to watch. I highly recommend going to check out some of his highlights because it kind of feels like a high school game at some points. But yeah, Skattebo is averaging over 100 yards a game. He's at 127 this year, Ethan. And he's going up against the Big 12's number 14 rushing defense in the Iowa State Cyclones. And there's only 16 teams in the Big 12 conference. So definitely that matchup leans in favor of the Sun Devils. And when you break it down a little bit further, you think of, okay, who are some of these best running backs Iowa State's faced this season? You think back to Devin Neal for the Jayhawks, who had a crazy game. He went for 116 and 2 touchdowns. And against RJ Harvey, the UCF running back, who I would say is also in that tier of elite back, he went for 203 and 2 touchdowns. So to get into the matchup, we asked Matt Campbell, hey, you've had the trouble. Are you going to be able to stop it this time around? And he says, yeah, there's maybe some things our defense has learned along the way to kind of figure out how to stop these guys. Will McLaughlin being back, I would say, helps with that. But I think it's going to be a huge task on Saturday.
Yeah, I think Scatabo added maybe 87 yards through the air to receiving when he played UNI. My first year covering the Panthers when he was with Sac State. So he can do it he can do it all. He's a real talented guy. Not surprised to see him have success with the Sun Devils. Looking just what's your general feel for the game? I guess are you confident after everything you've heard from the coaching staff?
I think every coaching staff has to project a little bit of confidence at this point in the season. Certainly, a lot of respect from both sides. Kenny Dillingham mentioned when he was a young up and coming coach, and he still kind of is a young and upcoming coach, but when he was even younger, he went to Iowa State to observe a Matt Campbell led practice because Iowa State was one of the programs he's respected. And certainly, so a lot of respect still there between those coaches. Both sides have earned this spot for a reason and are projecting confidence. But I don't know, Ethan. I really do think it's going to be a tall task to stop Cam Skattebo in this ASU offense. One thing that maybe changes the defensive game plan a little bit is Arizona State's going to be without its leading receiver. No Jordyn Tyson for the Sun Devils, who is third in the Big 12 this season in receiving yardage. And he's also looked at as an NFL guy who is certainly that changes the game plan. But if you're going to be one dimensional, having Cam Skattebo is a pretty good dimension.
Yeah, I was curious to ask you what you thought that the loss of the leading receiver would mean for the Sun Devils. So I'm glad you shared those thoughts. If I had to force a prediction on you, I'm not gonna, because we're gonna get into it later with the Sunday's headlines today, and we're gonna get an idea of what Ben wants to do. But there are some more concrete things happening in Hawkeye land. We have Kaleb Johnson announcing on Sunday he's headed to the NFL draft after putting together what might be the best running back season we've ever seen in Iowa City with 21 rushing touchdowns, 23 total touchdowns. Just an incredible season from the junior. So he's headed to the draft. And then on Wednesday, we kind of got the resolution to why Cade McNamara did not participate in senior day on Black Friday. He's entered the transfer portal. He's looking to go elsewhere to play a seventh year of college football. He started college football in 2019. I was a sophomore in college when Cade McNamara was a true freshman. So it's been pretty incredible to see his career longevity, I guess I'll say. He's certainly suffered through a couple of injuries that have allowed him and afforded him some extra time. And he sounded pretty optimistic in his Instagram post announcing his decision to enter the transfer portal. He says, I'm looking forward to this upcoming offseason being the healthiest that I have been in years. So he suffered a pretty major injury his last year at Michigan, suffered another major lower body injury last year, tearing his ACL. And then, of course, the concussion that forced him out against Northwestern in the eighth game of the season for Iowa. I was kind of looking at his player profile on the Iowa website. I'm not sure where that extra year of eligibility is going to come from with the medical waiver, but I suppose that's something to discuss in the future, and not something that we have a concrete answer to just yet. It's kind of in the hands of the NCAA, and they never make decisions that make sense, right?
No, hey, I remember having this exact same conversation covering Oklahoma State last year with Will Allen Bowman, a guy who had medical history and NCAA waivers up in the air. Will he get a seventh year of college football? And the NCAA said, "You get another year, you get another year." So maybe they'll do the same for McNamara. I was kind of wondering as I saw these two announcements from these two players who have been kind of the faces, perhaps, of Iowa football the last couple seasons. What was the fan reception from both of those two moves?
I mean, I saw a couple of comments saying, "You'll put the fries in the bag, whatever, bro." You can guess which post that was underneath. So it was definitely split. It was a lot more "thank you for what you did for the program" underneath one, and more like "good riddance" under the other. I think whenever a guy puts forth their best effort on the field, it's kind of hard to be overly critical to the point of like, put the fries in the bag. I don't like going that far, but I think that they're really sad to see Kaleb Johnson go, especially after the season that he saw, particularly because the talent was evident from his freshman season. The moment he got to Iowa, it was pretty obvious. I think he rushed for over 700 yards his freshman year. So it was pretty obvious that he was a good runner of the football. And then his sophomore slump, it was like they only ever got to see him at his absolute ceiling 1 year. And so maybe it feels like, oh, we just got him, and now he's gone, right? So I just think that is probably the biggest bummer for Hawkeye fans. Cade, with the way things ended, where it was like, is he healthy? Is he not? Is he going to play? He says he reaffirms his commitment, and then 2 weeks later, less than 2 weeks later, enters the transfer portal. I certainly think that's going to mar the memory of his time in Iowa City. And I certainly think that they were hoping for more success, given they added a former 5-star quarterback. But I mean, he won for the most part. He won the majority of his games that he started at Iowa. So maybe the history book will look on it a little bit fonder than the fans are going to remember it.
Yeah, that'll be interesting to see how he's remembered. And I'm excited after we finish up recording today to go to Hilton and watch the first top 10 non-conference matchup of top 10 teams ever in Hilton, in the Hilton Coliseum. That'll be a fun one. So you can check out, by the time this show drops, coverage from the Marquette and Iowa State basketball game. But I also picked up a notable basketball win. Catch us up on what's going on with that team.
Yeah, I mean, if you're a fan of Iowa hoops in 2019, you probably recognize what you saw last night as Josh Dix caught an inbound pass and hit a 3-pointer with zero point 0.8 seconds left on the clock to beat Northwestern 80-79. 2019 Jordan Bohannon hit a similar shot on a similar play call from Fran McCaffrey to beat Northwestern 80-79, as fate would have it. And David Eichel at 24/7 went a little bit further and pointed out that Iowa was going the same way on the court, but Iowa goes like they always go. I think it's south in the first half and north in the second half. So anytime they're going to hit a buzzer beater, it's going to be going that way. That's just kind of how it goes. But yeah, it was right away when we talked to the Northwestern head coach Chris Collins in post game. He's like, "Oh, I knew exactly what play they were going to run. I told the guys like this is what they're going to do. Like they hit the same shot on us in 2019. This is what they're going to do." Fran McCaffrey explained that that's a play call he likes to go to in that situation because of the situation. It's a really hard play to defend because Northwestern didn't want to foul. Iowa was in the double bonus. Northwestern was only ahead by 2, and you want to stick on the shooters as close as possible. So it's just a tricky play to guard, and Dix hit it. It was a fall away 35-footer. You can read a little bit more about it and maybe some of the clutch decisions that came before the shot from Peyton Sanford that'll set up the shot. But yeah, it was a big win. People were kind of making fun of the court storm online because maybe it wasn't a packed house. But I thought the student section was really impressive. Probably one of the better ones that they've had this year. And I think anytime there's a buzzer beater like that, there's going to be a little bit of post game antics from the crowd.
Courts and fields getting stormed everywhere across the state this week. What were your thoughts on the court storming? Was it something to poke fun at, or was it better than the TV portrayed?
I mean, I'm not gonna. You can't court storm wrong, I guess, right? I guess the only way you could court storm wrong is if you beat like Mississippi Valley State, right? Like the team that everyone's destroying, and like the Twitter admin is making like doing self-deprecating humor on Twitter all the time. Like if you court storm after beating them, maybe you did it wrong. But it's a conference foe. They're top 100 in the net. Iowa took a huge lead and then fell behind in the second half. They were up by 17 at one point and ended up trailing by as much as 6, I think, in the second half. So it was a pretty anxious, tense game. They'd fallen behind for like the final 6 minutes, 6 minutes and 8 seconds before Josh Dix hit that 3-pointer. Brock Harding had a huge almost and one. He hit an acrobatic, crazy layup. Like I have a picture of it, and he's just tossing the ball over his head basically, and he makes it. Missed the free throw, right? So they thought they were going to tie the game right there. Then they didn't get it, and then they didn't foul super quickly. So then they got 2 fouls. They hit 2 foul shots. They hit one, missed the other. They get the ball up the court. Price Sanford is going to be the one to take the shot. The look doesn't look good. And then they call the timeout and get to play to Josh. So I mean, from just like a pure box score watching, it's like, why would they court storm this game? I think it was warranted. I'm not going to make fun of it.
Yeah, no, just because of the way I think they won that game, throwing it back to several years ago when you were a sophomore in college. I think it's pretty cool to see a similar buzzer beating shot. We can get into our Sunday's headlines today now on the show. And Ethan, I can kick it off talking about the Big 12 championship game. That game is going to be dominating Sunday's headlines for better or for worse for the Cyclones. And I think it's going to be for the worse. I think the leading headline is going to be Lights, Camera, Skattebo, because I think Arizona State's running back is going to run all over Iowa State's defense. And that's no disrespect necessarily to Iowa State's defense, because Skattebo's been doing it to everybody. Arizona State's perhaps the hottest team in all of college football right now. With the way they're playing, so much confidence. I think Skattebo is the leader of that team, and they're going to rely on him with a limited passing ability, perhaps with Tyson out. So I think Skattebo is going to headline an Arizona State victory, which means headline number 2, Arlington Cemetery for Iowa State's playoff hopes. It was all but confirmed on Tuesday night. They ran through the projections, and kind of like election night, they're up at the board mapping out the scenarios, and Iowa State with a win is 100% in the playoff. Iowa State with a loss is 0% in the playoff. So I think it's going to be on the 0 end of that. But I always do a different kind of third headline, because the Cyclones have really surprised me at a lot of points this season. And when you think back to the UCF game or even the Kansas game, when opposing running backs really ran all over the Cyclones, none of those games were necessarily over or blowouts. Like, the Cyclones didn't get blown out of the gym, if you will. They had chances. Even the Kansas game felt maybe a little bit further away than it actually was. And that's because Rocco Becht has kept the Cyclones in these games. If Rocco Becht is able to play a perfect game and limit his turnover-prone plays, which have been a problem, I'd say, ever since tight end Benjamin Bramer has been out, then Iowa State has a chance to stay in any game, no matter how many yards its defense gives up. I'll say this, Ethan. If Rocco Becht gets the ball in his hand, down 6, with 1.5 minutes left to go, just like in 2020, I don't think the Cyclones finish 34 yards short.
Calling it his shot. I was gonna say, I think the first game I ever did a takeaway story for was UNI Sac State, and I think I was very confident that UNI was gonna stop Skattebo, and then I think in the second quarter he had a long run, and I immediately had to delete that takeaway. So he's certainly a talented running back. Arlington Cemetery, at least it's like a hero's burial, right? They're getting a hero's rest, right?
Yeah,
So
yeah.
I think that's kind of how history will remember this ISU team, regardless of how it finishes. And then we'll see about Rocco. I've been a Rocco fan for a while now, so we'll see. For Iowa's headlines, I think on Sunday it's going to be Tampa time. From what we're hearing, from what we're seeing, it's sounding like it's going to be the ReliaQuest Bowl on January 1st for the Hawkeyes. Indeterminate who the opponent is going to be. Likely an SEC. It's going to be an SEC opponent, so that'll be fun. Hopefully, it doesn't end up like last year. Number 2 headline is the sky is falling, and then parentheses not. Whenever there's a lot of transfers out, it always feels like the program's falling apart. You're going to go 0-12 next year, and my one word of caution is Iowa's 23 players over the roster limit of 105 at this point, so there's going to be serious attrition. They just signed 17 high school players, so there's going to need to be even more just people transferring out, people leaving the program. So the sky is not falling. It might feel like it, but it's not. And the final headline is going to be the portal giveth. Right now, especially if the scenario where the sky is falling plays out the way I expect it to, it's going to feel like the portal only takes away from the program. But I have a feeling that there might be a couple of key additions out of the portal that'll play Nick Jackson sized, or have a Nick Jackson sized impact on the future of Hawkeye football. So it's not all downhill in the portal. There's going to be some benefit from the portal.
Check back in with us on Sunday to see if our Sunday headline predictions came true. Thanks for following along with all of our football coverage. Football season not over yet. Basketball season picking right back up. So we'll be here back probably for a Sunday rewind show talking about bowl destinations and perhaps the college football playoff. Join us then.